Welcome back on the Leaders Who Care 138 episode. It's been more than 3 years now, and thank you guys for being with us today. As you know, we're on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world and every industry. And today we have the privilege to welcome a guest that I truly am inspired by and honor the work he does. A partner of THNK Schools of Leadership and develops and interact external experiential programs actually to develop leaders around the world and committed to make a positive change. I have the privilege to welcome Mark Vernooij. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today and really happy to have you.
Marion, it's a real privilege. I've been following your podcast for a while. You've had many more people on than me and many more inspiring people than me. So I'm honored to be part of the lineup. And yeah, we have stories that we share, I think, in both of our lives. We'll do them very different. Really excited.
Thank you. I love really a number of things, many things what you do, especially developing others, really paving the way of those leaders who can really make a positive impact, thriving at work, very, very passionate like you are and would love to. So we'll thrash out a few topics that we both share, but really talking about THNK talks about being the place, really meet the human sides. Tell us more about what goes on in the THNK, and how did you get there? What inspired you really to become the partner of the School of Leadership?
Oh, there's so many questions, and I think first, what goes on? We do leadership development, right? We say we try and support the leaders we need for the world we want, or create the leaders we need for the world we want. So we think about the big problems in the world, and we know a couple, the big opportunities in the world, and what kind of leaders we all dream to have to create a world that's even better than it is today, or better than it is today.
I love that.
And yeah, so that's really why I'm here, and that's something that pulled me into THNK. Obviously, we've been doing this now for about 14 years. So it's been a bit of a journey, and we learned a lot along the way, but I'm still very excited and passionate about this theme of leaders who could potentially be one of the biggest levers for change. If you think about it, there's many ways to create positive impact in the world. You and I both share that mission. We do it all in different ways, and I think leadership development is one lever that you could pull. And there's one we chose that we think is quite big.
Okay, wow, I really like what you just said, that we're thinking strategically of what we want to live in, right? And then work backwards and say who can actually deliver that? What is the type of phrase in leadership that really, and how do they get trained? Because as we see it, it's a system. If you can create a system that really foster and develop, based on the values of really the kindness, of really the positive impact, and be able to not just do one-off by chance, but able to reproduce consistently, then this is something really special. And 14 years is a very long time for really any organization, if you think about. So well done on doing. I'm sure there will be many more to come. But talking about where leaders meet their human side, and really that topic. What is your take? I mean, I hope one day we are all obsolete. We don't have to call a podcast called Leaders Who Care, because in my mind, every leader should care. But we know that's not yet the case.
Yeah, and I love how you picked up on that theme of what is it you want to create in the world, and therefore what are the leaders we need, right? And if I think about this notion of the human side of leaders, or in your words, leaders who care, right? Um, it's always been somewhat important, right? Leadership, probably in history, for most leaders, it was also true that you needed to care a little bit. So a lot of things have stayed stable over time. A lot of things around leadership in general have stayed stable over time. As a leader, you need to be somewhat smart, right? You need to be able to take decisions. You need to be able to come up with an idea or a vision. That has been the same for Cleopatra and for Jack Welch
Yes.
and for Elon Musk, right? It doesn't matter. But if we think about today's world that we live in and why I think there's this zeitgeist of leaders who care or the human leader has to do with the fact that the world has changed quite a bit. If you look at the world today, it's way more interconnected. It's way bigger. So all our systems are bigger. If you think about the amounts of technology that you and I are surrounded by, and I don't just mean the laptop we're on or the phone we use, but even if I take something simple as a pen that's here, this pen probably is made by, I don't know, 50 people across 8 countries if you go all the way down in the supply chain. So our interconnectedness and the size of systems, the size of organizations forces us or makes all these systems way more complex. And we notice that. We notice that the world feels a little bit more complex than it felt yesterday, right? We notice that things break down somewhat more often. We notice that we can't quite control it as much as we thought we could. When we thought about organizations back in the industrial age, we said, oh, we can peel down the organization in all these small bits and we can put them on a line and then we have a factory and we can control that whole system. We feel that it breaks down. We feel that we can't fully top down organize everything anymore. And that fuels something that I would say is requiring us not to look at humans as robots who we can instruct to do 1, 2, or 3, but to really have a dialogue, to really have a peer-based relationship, if you will, but really have an honest human conversation about what they want, what they see, what they can, so that we leverage the potential of the humans in the organization. So that all of them can together think smartly and intelligently and strategically about where to take the organization, and all of them can truly contribute. So I think the complexity in the world forces us to, in a sense, the things and the systems becoming bigger, and the increasing complexity forces us to make it more simple and smaller and connect with people more, because we need more distributed leadership rather than just top-down leadership.
I really like what you just said, distributed leadership. And I've seen some of because I'm deeply passionate about exceptional leaders, incredible minds that really care and make the difference. Because results matter. In leadership, after all, you have to deliver results. But what we want to show is that by caring and making it really the steps and having that through those beliefs and values really can multiply that even in a much greater scale. And often I've seen if the 10x performers depend on exactly what you just said, distributed leadership. They really empower an array of leaders or middle management, if you would like to call it, and they are aligned on the mission. They really are consistent. Because behind every great company, there's a great team. What is your advice to leaders, perhaps, that are in transformation stage? Because we see a lot of transformation cases right now as we speak across the world, because the world is very dynamic, inflation, wars. So that stability that we enjoyed for the last 20, 30 years, it's no longer the case. So for me, that's a great time to really test the leadership. You really shine in times of trouble, whether you make it or not, and you can't hide when it's when it's trouble. So when leaders are now considering transformation and they're really in the midst of one, and they're moving away from that top down to perhaps more distributed leadership, what would be your advice? Where do they start such a process? Because and how long, in your experience, can take for a more well-established company that is over 1,000 people of size?
Yeah, I love that question. We're involved in so many. We support typically not just individual leaders, but a lot of companies. So we have a lot of clients that are in transformation. I think one is you can't change the world around you if you don't change what's inside of
That's very interesting.
you. So there's a little bit of change always needed in yourself if you want to change something around you. And so I think transformation is a journey. And if you don't realize that you have to be on that journey yourself as well, then it gets a little bit difficult. Now, there's a couple of things that we know about transformations. We know, for example, that certain leaders have more capacity to transform organizations lastingly than others. We know that leaders actually play a significant role in transformations. The quote here is, there is no organization that performs at a higher level than the performance of its leader. It just doesn't happen. I haven't seen it. And sometimes that's the individual leader, sometimes it's the leadership team. But as a leadership team, if you don't perform at a higher level, you can't pull your organization up either. If you think about individual leaders, there's some level of growth that you have to have gone through. We can talk about that more. We sometimes call it vertical growth, but there's very distinct steps that leaders go through. And if you don't go through enough of those distinct steps, then research clearly shows that lasting transformations are just not capable for you. And so there is some personal growth that you have to have gone through as a leader. There's only 5% of adults who have grown through to the stages where you can actually transform a company, whether it's exactly 5% or slightly more, but it's not that many adults who have actually grown to that stage where they're able to create lasting transformations.
I would love to elaborate more on that. So if you can really zoom into the stages because it's clearly linked. Before you grow your company as a leader, you got to transform yourself. And you said certain leaders have more capacity than others. So I'm interested in both of those topics. What are the stages that a leader needs to go through in order to grow their company or expand their capacity? And how do you I guess, assess or look at the capacity of leaders? What do they have today,
Sure.
and how could they change?
Yeah, so this this field of thinking is sometimes called adult vertical development or vertical development or adult developmental theory. This was already started in the early part of the previous century by a guy called Piaget, who researched children and how they developed. And he found that they develop in very distinct steps. And there's different models out there, but if we simplify it a little bit, a baby gets born into the world and they are the world. Which is why if an object comes into their field of vision, they're surprised and they love it, right? There's the Kickaboo game. And every time that object comes into their field of vision, they're surprised and they're excited because they are the world. So it comes into existence in their world, in themselves. At a certain point, children learn that this thing is something that they can manipulate, right? And then they start throwing it on the ground, right? We all know our kids or our nephews who throw their food on the ground or throw the pen on the ground or whatever it is, and time again. And that's exciting because they're for the first time learning in this second stage that they can manipulate objects around them. Now, at that stage, they still have their emotions quite closely attached. They are angry, so they hit their brother. They are hungry, so they take the cookie of their sister, right? And that takes a little while. And somewhere along the lines of puberty or so, children develop into a phase where they can actually postpone their emotions for the benefit of the tribe. whether the tribe is the family or the company or the town or the, doesn't matter. And this is a great invention of our species, if you will. We can suspend our own needs for the benefits of others, for the benefits of the larger whole. This is how we collaborate. This is how we raise a barn. And this is how we do everything we do as societies. So it's a great invention, and most adults are in this state. Most adults, about 75%, are in this kind of state when they graduate from university, say. And there is some people that graduate from that state. This was only found out in the 80s. Before the 80s, we thought that if people start physically growing, they also stop mentally growing. Turns out that's not completely the case. You can continue to grow. The thing is, when you're in that, what we sometimes call socialized mind, in that state where we can postpone our own needs for the benefit of the tribe, we are looking at the tribe a lot for confirmation. We're looking at the tribe to confirm that we're doing things right. Because in our minds, we're either in the tribe or outside the tribe. Where the world is either black or it's right. Everything has to have one answer. This is, and this stage, therefore, is sometimes simplifies the world a little bit too much. And some people, about 20% of adults or so, grow out of this stage into something that we call self-authoring. But forget that name, it's not that important. But in that stage, they're able to say, maybe there's not just being in the tribe or out of the tribe, subscribing to the mission, visions, values of the tribe or not, but maybe I can engage with my own mission, vision, value. Maybe I can bring my own view to the table, even if people don't like it. And maybe I can still then be part of the tribe as well. This is where the change makers come up. And we know these change makers, right? That in the face of everything, just get stuff done. They bring out a product that nobody thought they needed. They bring out a service that nobody thought was possible. They do things. They build rockets and fly to Mars, despite the fact that everybody thinks that's crazy, right? These entrepreneurs who go through walls. But these are change makers that go through walls and make stuff happen. And there is always a bit of a rough edge to these change makers. Because while they do see that between black and white there's gray, they also get a little bit attached to their view of how to make change happen. And they get a little bit unnuanced in how they bring others along or not, or how they talk to others that are not agreeing. And there is about 5% of adults who actually grow out of that into something we call sometimes called self-transforming, where they're able to see that it's not just black, white, and gray, but that black only exists because white exists. And if you deeply understand that and believe that, then you also understand that if there's people with you, there have to be people against you, and they also have a role to play. So then you get a little bit more soft in how you start making change happen. And somewhere on the edge between those two phases is where actually people start to be capable of making lasting transformation.
That's very interesting indeed, Mark. And should any leaders interested to embark on such a transformation, how do you support companies? I think if somebody is interested to reach out or obviously dive deeper, what would be your advice? Maybe some books or literature they could read, or if they want to talk to you directly, what would be the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, so if we talk about individuals, if you want to embark on such a transformation, and I love that you say the word transformation, because this is a personal transformation. Yeah. Also means it's a little bit difficult, right? There's typically 3 things people can do. They can seek out heat experiences, diverging perspectives, and they can engage in elevated sense making. heat experiences is about finding difficult moments. This can be when you get a new role, right? When you get a new job, when something difficult comes on your path. That can be in your work, it can also be in your private life. We all know of ourselves or of people around us that have gone through very difficult times and say, but I came out of it better. That's a heat experience where people grow through. It really helps to engage and get more perspectives in, different
Yes.
perspectives, so you open up your worldview and your ability to hold more complexity. And it helps to reflect on your experiences, because people don't learn through experience. They actually learn by reflecting on it, on experience. So that's what individuals can do. As companies, of course, it's a way bigger question, because it's not just about leadership development. It's also about getting in a good enough, inspiring vision of where you want to go. It's also about getting clear on the first step and how you're going to get there. So there's way more involved. So there, we help some organizations more with the leadership part of it, some organizations more with what we call self-transforming. So we help them transform themselves. And those are a little bit longer and more difficult journeys that we engage in, but super exciting to do.
Excellent. Just coming back on the 3 points you mentioned for individuals, you said the first is difficult experiences to learn. If you summarize the three again, just as and how do they find them? Obviously, first was clear, but there was two others that they
Yeah.
should like look for.
Yeah, so the heat experience indeed are those difficult
Yeah, that's
experiences.
what
You
it's called,
find them.
heat, right? Heat
Um,
experience, like it's
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Then the diverging perspectives is all about finding people who look at the world differently from you.
opposing
That can be
views.
by reading books.
Yeah,
That can be by listening to the Leaders Who Care podcast, right? Or any other podcast that you find interesting. That can be by engaging with other people. Particularly in my case, I love engaging with individuals, and particularly I love doing that outside of my own industry. Obviously, I learn from others that are doing leadership development, but I get more insights when I talk to an architect or an artist, and that's just the letter A, right? There's a lot of people out there who have very different life experiences, knowledge, and practices that they do, and different ways of looking at life. So the more you can open up, the better it is. Um, and then elevated sense making. That's about reflecting. As I said, reflecting on experience is how we learn, not just the experience itself. Different horses for different courses. I love doing that with my friends, with my wife. Other people love doing that on their own. Journaling is a great tool. It doesn't work for me, but I know it works for a lot of people. Some people love meditating on things. So there's different ways of doing that. Some people say that by running or by doing exercise, they actually reflect on their experiences of the day or the week. So it's different practices, but those are the things to engage in. And then obviously you can go to all kinds of leadership programs. Obviously we put those kind of things at the center of our leadership programs.
thank you. That is wonderful. Really well summarized, and I think it's really helpful if people want to, because without transforming our own self, we cannot manifest the results that are waiting for us. So they're there. We just need, but not for the version of ours today. We need to transform to be able to access, as we say, that level of results, that level of success. But it's always there.
I love how you say that. That's beautiful. It is already there. All you need to do is open the right door.
Like I always was reflecting of and listening to different perspectives, but is exactly opening a door. The door, it's behind that door is what you're waiting for. But to open a door, there's three different ways. One is you need the right key. So through the transformation, you get the right key, I guess. Um, the other way is through forcing the door. So you have strength, and you have really that power, to get in, and or knocking. It's knocking shall be open, because you have favor of people by knocking on the door, which is to your point of having different perspective, asking questions, being interested. Then they might open it, so you don't have to force it. You may not have a key, but it might open it because you knocked on it. So I really I love what you just sharing here and how helpful this is. And really, as a child of an artist yourself, how do you think, this has played a role in your own personal development?
Yeah, I think, yeah, as you say, both my parents are artists. My grandfather was an inventor, and that meant that looking at things from a different perspective was common in our household.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and the other thing is there were always other people around us that looked at the world and tried to reflect on it and make sense from it, and usually in a slightly different way than most people would do. So I think that was pushed into me or brought into me or given to me already at an early age. The love of speaking to a lot of different people and the everlasting search for a slightly different perspective on the same problem. So I think that has really formed me.
Well, that is really interesting. We all know that childhood and plays a really critical role for how we shape up as individuals. And we refer to really the method that looks at children's development, child's development. We all know how important is that. But unfortunately, as parents, we often now a lot more we have access to great information, but before we were not trained. It's like having the greatest precious really life, and you don't know how to bring it. It was more trial and error, which is why we probably have a lot of issues in the world anyway. But really thinking about the from that early stage, early growth, and reflecting, like you're making the child being the world and then being part of the world, and also we hopefully bring some value to the children, but often we pollute them with our own uh, beliefs and systems. What would be your perhaps advice to parents specifically that bringing their children, that because often, you are approaching this from leadership, but for them, for those children to perhaps become like what you just mentioned. I was born a family that impacted me, looking from different perspective.
Hmm.
Um, and how could they really burn the bridge from the negative from the family that's been passed on to something more positive? And maybe the parents can play a key role, especially in the first 7 years of development of the child.
Hmm.
Can they change the negative trends, and how could they approach that?
So this is by no means my field of expertise, and I'm not a parent myself, so I'm at great risk of saying something here. But there's a couple of things. One is you don't have to teach an acorn how to become an oak.
Okay.
In the same way, most stuff is already baked into kids. It will just come. And we spend a lot of time, or I think a lot of parents spend a lot of time trying to get the stuff in there faster, trying to make that one branch of the oak grow faster or do the growth a little bit faster. I mean, it will come on its own time. So there's a lot of stuff that I think parents actually don't have to worry about.
That's a great
So
point.
that saves quite a bit of time. And then I would loop it back to the start of our conversation. We need more humanity in the world, or care in your words. So if you're there, if you can be there as fully and as present as you can be, I think that's the biggest gift you can give your child. And then the last thing is probably we all screw up. So don't beat yourself up, because that's part of your job, is to screw it up. and to make mistakes. So I don't think being too tiptoeing too much, trying not to make mistakes, all of that I think is wasted time.
Which saves a lot of actually time and effort, because sometimes if you are pushing things too fast, too soon, you could just wait a little bit and enjoy life more, have more joy, and then more presence, and therefore, things will come on its own. It's like pushing a ball uphill sometimes, when actually you just have to wait a little and it will go on its own. It's a very, very good example here. When you talk about coming back to the leadership really topic, and what should come first, or how do we balance the self-development as a leader or development of our teams? What is the priority?
Yeah, and I would almost add development of our organization on a
Yeah,
third level, right? So there's the self, the team, and then the content, and the
yeah,
strategy or the vision or the operations and all of that. And I think in most of our work we do all three at the same time,
okay.
um, because they all influence each other.
Yes.
So sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit of start on the inside, but that's primarily if you're designing a learning program, because that also means that people can land a little bit in themselves with each other. But if I think about working with any team, we do all three at the same time, and we do a lot of team-based work. And if I think about people who are responsible for an organization, you have to play each of those three games at the same time. And there's a very interesting intellectual discussion you can have about a slight difference back and forth between those. But I think it's mostly academic and rather unhelpful in practice to spend a lot of time thinking about that. I think spending the time thinking about what needs most attention now is interesting, right? There is moments when I need more attention on developing myself again. So a couple of years ago, I spent serious time developing myself because I felt like I was plateauing. I still spend time on my own development. This is a lot less now than 4 years ago. And I might be wrong, but I think there is cycles in. So I might be wrong about where I need to spend my own time right now. But I'm pretty convinced that there are cycles in how much time I need to spend on myself. The same holds for my team. As a team, we always need to grow and improve. Yet there were moments that we were in distress, or moments where we needed a recess, where you need to overinvest. And then sometimes you need to put extra effort on getting some part of the operation smart or fixed, or you need additional time to adjust your strategy because of all these changing forces that you were alluding to earlier. And then all of a sudden that takes over. So I think it's way more interesting to think about this as three things that you always need to pay attention to, but you can up the dial and down the dial a little bit on all three. And that's the time-based perspective, which is hugely individual and hugely contextual. If your industry is all of a sudden in overhaul, or if for your podcast, if all the technology all of a sudden doesn't work, then I know that your coaching session goes out the window with your coach, right? You have to fix all the technology. If in my school, I think if 3 people of my team leave, then I'm not going to spend much time on the strategy. I'm not going to spend much time on myself. I need to fix the team. And that's on the stressor side, but there's the same on the opportunity side, right? If you see that there's momentum to capture in the market, then you might want to spend some time on your strategy. If you see that there's really a next step that you can grow to. And the way I do it is I regularly reflect on this with the people around me, with my wife, with my team, with friends.
That's very helpful. And just listening to you carefully, and business and companies, as we're both deeply interested, how can making a positive impact complement the business results? And do we have to sacrifice one or the other, do you think?
Yeah, and I love the question, and I think it's almost wrongly phrased. Um, and and be- and that's not strange because we're so programmed that business results means financial results. That's so programmed in our economy and our society today. But if we go back to when we started organizations, why did we start organizations? In my country, it was because we had a lot of water and very little land. So we needed to build little dikes and a windmill to push the water out of the dikes. So we had a little new piece of land. And on your own, you couldn't do that. With your family, you couldn't do that. But with 3 families or half a town, you could. That's why we needed an organization. Later on, we said we want to venture out into the world and we want to sail a little bit farther. So we need to build a bigger boat. And a bigger boat you couldn't build on your own, you couldn't build with your family, but you needed investment and money and support from others around you. So we created companies to build bigger boats so we could venture further. All these things were just to accomplish something, to make sure that we had something, that we found adventure, that we created products that weren't there before, like a boat or a dike or a windmill, that benefited the lives of people. So at the end of the day, the company should be there to benefit the lives of people. And not just the people who own the company, because that's just a construct, but the people who are around that company. And maybe we can say it should also benefit the place they live in. I kind of take that for granted, right? So then we can all of a sudden think about the planet and the other species, etc. But I think that should be the default. Now we forgot that a little bit. We started finding out. Somebody at some point said that the business of business is business. That was Friedman, if I'm not wrong. I.e., business should only make money, or at least that was the interpretation that was given by a lot of people, and that of course is plainly wrong, particularly if it's money only for shareholders. So we got a little bit off track. And it's almost like when you organize a road trip. And you say, Marion, let's go on a road trip. You say, where do we go? You say, oh, we're going to go far and we're going to drive all the way from, I don't know, Italy to somewhere in deep down in Asia. And then we say, oh, but we need a little bit of gas because then we need gas for in the car. Now we might make gas a little bit of a KPI to track. But if 2 years later, the two of us are calling each other up and say, we're doing well on the road trip. I've got a lot of gas in my garage and you've got a lot of gas in your garage and we still haven't gone on the road trip. We're a little bit screwed up, right? And I think in our companies, we're starting to count more gas than adventures. So I think that's the reason why I think the question is a little bit wrong. I think it should be about the adventure. And when we look at it, when we think about the adventure or the benefits of the people and the planet and society, if we think about those benefits and we see organizations prioritizing them, then we see talent wanting to work there more. Then we see that typically they flourish. People are happier there. And in a world where 70% of employees are disengaged, that's pretty important. Yeah. And so we also see some statistics that those companies might make a little bit more money. But whether those are true or not, I'm not quite sure. And there's always other statistics out there. We see some proof. You mentioned earlier, B Corps make 25% more revenue instead of another number. But you can argue that there's a selection bias there. So it's always a little bit difficult. I think you can do good and do well. I think that's entirely possible. Even if you can't, you should still do good.
That's what you just shared here is the role of care is what we should go back to the roots why we start the company. Often is to solve a problem, accomplish something that will make a positive difference to the world. Not, as you say, pile it up with a lot of gas, but then really not benefiting just a few. And I think this is why, and from my perspective and experience, exceptionally gifted leaders and talent look for exactly that. What are you going to do with with your business, with your company, why you exist? Are you piling, as you say, gas and for a few, or are you really using that gas to make a difference
Yeah.
to the world? And I think we love the idea of great leaders don't set out to be leaders. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, it's about the goal. Does the mindset make a big difference in being, is there such thing as natural leader?
Well, I think sometimes we talk about capabilities, and a capability for me breaks down into knowledge, skills, and mindset. So as a educator, if you will, I have to think about knowledge, skills, and mindset. For me, the knowledge is out there in the world. We all have plenty of it. We all have a thing like this that has all the knowledge in the world at our fingertips. So that's the cheap part of development. Skill building, for many skills, you can also just go online and for $5 do a course or learn it on YouTube. Not for all skills, for the mindset change and the mindset development. That's the most important. That's where we spend most of our time. That's the most difficult to do, but it's also the stuff that pays off most. If I can help people to see the world in a different way, to interpret the world in a different way, because they have a different operating system, then they will act in a different way, and they will find the knowledge they need. So I think mindset is essential. And then is that born or is that made? I think we spend a lot of time helping people grow in their leadership. So there's a lot of making that can be done. And obviously, some people like leading more than others. Some people are slightly more gifted at it than others. That's no different. I mean, we're in the day of the European Soccer Championship right now. I was not born to become a great soccer player. But the soccer players who are now great soccer players trained a hell of a lot, right? So it's always a combination. But if you want to be the best, there's a little bit of a combination of both.
Thank you, Mark. This has been absolutely a pleasure. The question I have for you is, how do you take care of yourself? How do you really refill, replenish? Because someone said to me, it's not always about how hard you work that really matters, but also how well do you rest. So, what are your strategy for taking care of yourself?
Yeah, thanks. So one is I work hard and I rest hard in a way. But what I mean with that is that like this week and next week are just mayhem. It's just a mess. I have to be in multiple countries and my agenda is filled every day to the brink. But then the week after, I will pretty much clear my agenda. I have 3 calls a day. In the middle of the day, I'll go out into the garden. I'll play with the dogs. I'll do some woodwork in the shed. So I do stuff that I love. And so at the moment that the pressure is not on, I also really take the pressure off hard. And I don't feel guilty about watching a Netflix series at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. So there's that works for me, is these high highs and these low lows, where very high activity and very deep rest. And I hinted on some of the things I like doing, right? I like playing with my dogs. I like being out in nature. I love working in the garden and working with wood in the shed that I have. So those are the kind of things. And then the other thing is intellectual stimulation. So I'm a nut for consuming information. And it can be about anything. I can just get into a new topic and then go into that rabbit hole. And my wife starts complaining after the weekend that I've spent the whole time on YouTube and in books trying to figure something new out. You see some books behind me, but that's a very small percentage of my library. And also my podcast library is quite sizable.
Love it. Final question, Mark. What are your really future wish if you were able to change one thing in the world and you have unlimited resources to make the world more caring, more positive? What would that be?
It's a beautiful question. And choosing one thing. I think for me it would be, I would wish that the leaders we have, I would wish for the leaders we have and the leaders we're getting to have a little bit more time to spend on growing themselves, on, as we sometimes say, sharpening the soul. There's this story of the woodworker who's chopping harder and harder every day and chopping less trees every day. And then the other guy who's chopping evenly hard every day takes an hour for lunch. But it turns out that during that hour he sharpens the saw and he chops way more wood, more trees than any other tree cutter. So that notion of spending time on sharpening the saw, there's something really weird that in our educational system, there's some kind of assumption that all education has to be front loaded in the first 18 years of your existence. And after that, there's kind of nothing programmed for you. You have to figure it out yourself. And for many people, and it doesn't have to be formal education, that's not the point, but to find moments to reflect on what you're doing, to go through heat experiences, to find different perspectives, to gain things that allow you to grow that operating system. I think that's what I'd wish for a lot of leaders in the world. And I think the world would be a better place for it.
Beautiful. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much for all the insights you've shared. It was a real celebration for me, and also look at a number of the new perspectives. Really wishing you a blessed year for the rest of the year. We're entering the second half, and blessings to you and your team and your family. And thank you for being a leader who cares and spending the time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing the work, for giving this to the world. I think it's important. I hope my contribution is a little bit, but I know the work you've put in is tremendous. And I really loved being on here today.
Thank you, Mark.